Greetings, all praise the King on this day. Today, the topic is the state of Isbaal. Falsely identified with the state of I people under the guidance of I Master. Even the descendants of Jacob, who is known as Israel. I and I are the 12 tribes. There has come a group of people, sometimes referred to as Ashkenazi, that have taken I faith and attempted to adopt and adapt to their ways. Now, this is man made, not I will. This is the ultimate blasphemy. And the history is such where there were some individuals that had power over the masses of populations in their regions as the Babylonians conquered throughout the earth and set up their empires. They converged the cultures to their own. This was the making of their hands, also known as idolatry. Once these individuals knew their wealth was at stake, if the populations discovered their secrets, they established a bond and took on the story, identified in the Holy Bible as their own. Because as we know, the story is that Israel will be a chosen people, a particular kind, given even in matrimony unto Lord. And so in this time, as the prophecies are fulfilled, this is the coming of I people to gather and to form a nation. The Babylonians attempted to hide these truths, yet when these truths became discovered, largely in part through the Eastern faith of the Ethiopian, because as the message was spread, that region became a Christ state, having religious law. And then, as in accordance to the call to spread this good tiding abroad. And so the devil, having established himself in the Church of Rome, now began to counterfeit the message to fortify position. As time has advanced, there was the similar effort to take the faith of the original Hebrew people onto the blasphemers for their purpose of gain, even as foretold in the book of Revelation, that there would be some that would call themselves Jews, yet were not. And these being of the synagogue of Satan are mentioned twice. Today, if you pay attention to the world through their communication channels, you'll hear this term often used. To most people, you don't see any problem. You know, when you step outside, you don't hear anybody using slang terms about Jews, so-called Jews. And yet, you hear these racist comments, you know that those are prevalent. So there's a mismatch between what's being fed down those channels to what reality is. And there are certain groups that are labeled hate groups, obviously rightfully so, and yet these groups are being introduced as being larger than the problem. They are small groups of individuals. If you hear about any protest about white supremacists, and you take pictures, or you get some information, you might find out that there's only a dozen or so of them. If it's a larger group, it's possible that some of them are actors. With the economy being automized, you're getting more desperate people that are willing to do almost anything. And so in 1948, there was a setup of this state of Isbaal. Most critical, because this is not the state of Israel. When you identify it as Israel, or if you identify the people therein as Jews, then you have done a disservice to your Creator. This has become a diabolic embryo, producing the infestation that now corrupts the foundation of morality to take on a holy name for your personal gain without abiding by high law. The highest crime. So, as we've said, Lord has made man in Lord's image, and man has attempted to make Lord in his. And even so, in this new age of technological advancement, where you individuals within this community developing, these idols to replicate nature, the ultimate blasphemy. Even terming themselves as gods. I suppose it would be one thing to worship other gods as the pagans, even in the ancient days, as they had built their molten images, and yet an entirely new thing to have considered yourself gods. The cultures the Babylonians had done so in theory, as they had proclaimed to their populations they were gods, therefore the populations must serve them, for example in Egypt. Yet, did they actually think this? Today, confounded generation has begun to believe their own lies. The sign of Satanism. This is a new era, even the end times. Some people refer to as the New World Order having started at this point. At least, because some people think that this is something that, they're defending against. This is coming and they've got to stop it. No, it's here. There's a New World Order. What is that? That is a system of international law. This is worldwide. You can think of these individuals as apostates. You can think of them as grease monkeys. But if you lessen the tone of the term and yet still produce an adequate characterization, you could consider those individuals that have profited off of this crime as the world leaders. They have led the world to their place. The eye of man knows as hell. For if the kingdom is now, then how shall hell not be? This is a kind of spiritual awakening, knowing of the suffering of many and the indulgence of others. Yet to come to know this truth is to come to know and to enter. And so, if you tell these individuals that bark about this holocaust on a 24/7, round the clock, day in, day out, that 30% of those that are said to have been insinuated, exterminated, were Christian, then, what kind of response would you get? I mean, because this is all part of the story. Obviously, it's not discussed in those terms. I mean, if you take those kinds of numbers, then typically you wouldn't actually identify it with being a kind of a Jewish holocaust. You would just say it was about all people, and then maybe you would think there'd be more to the story, perhaps. And the other thing is, if you go and you ask people today, what do you have a religion? Are you religious? And you'll probably get some responses. Maybe people will say they're Christian. Maybe people will say they're Jews. Maybe they'll tell you that. And then if you ask them about the scripture, how many of them would actually know? Like some of the older ones, perhaps. Some of the younger ones, maybe not. The pictures of Holocaust, many of those individuals were fairly young. Certainly adults, some of them had children, but they were younger. So you could do kind of a study in that way. The point is that, just by saying this number of people were this and this number of people were that, does it really pertain? Because if those people didn't actually practice faith, how would we really know what they were? And there's also something where some people say they're something that they're not. The amount of discussion around a topic would certainly make someone suspicious, because it's not it's uneven. When you have 30%, for example, that are Christians, and Christians are almost never mentioned. Similar to the Forbes richest people story, where the Rothschilds, who actually have some influence over the state of Israel, are never mentioned, is one to believe that the Rothschilds are not within those ranks ever. This whole time, they haven't been able to make $1 billion, and that's just one example. Obviously, there's other families around the earth that are not published as well. So that could be a reason for a cause of suspicion. How are they able to disguise their money? See, the goal was to privatize the word, even Lord itself. They seek to own everything. When you make this a place, your incubator, you have privatized this nation, and now allowing your infestation to spawn from. In the way of these advancements that are now giving these world leaders more power than ever. The ability to watch almost anyone, anywhere, at any time. They're seeking to listen to almost anyone, anywhere, at any time. We're going to be doing some more reports. We have some interesting stories about some of the abilities now. So this is a private state, the first of its kind. It's the beginning of the going away of nation states, which supposedly, under their system they call democracy, is to be governed by the people. What people? Nevertheless, it was a good sale to make people, the underprivileged populations buy. Today, with the new automation and their the formation of their antichrist, the power is exceeding, to the point where there's no need now to even try to have to convince the populations that they got some kind of control over their government. So the governments and the nation states will go away, and it will just become one private state, the state of Isbaal.